Hi, Olesya. Thank you for coming here for the interview. Let's start with the peace process. Armenia says they're ready to sign the peace document, and Azerbaijan says that it's ready for about 80%, and there is more work to do. So could you please elaborate on this? Why do they have different approaches and different stances on this?
So they have been working on this content or with so-called peace agreement, although it's kind of more looks like a declaration rather than a comprehensive peace treaty. They have been working on it for over 3 years now. And then what we see is, especially during the last several weeks, their attempt to come up with a format that would allow them to proceed with kind of the first step forward in this long process. And then that first step is, of course, not going to kind of meet the expectations of everyone. So, and then we now see both sides, both officials in Baku and also in Yerevan, making now even public proposals that would kind of explain how to proceed. And then we have heard the Azerbaijani president saying that let's just kind of make a statement and leave all the issues kind of for the talks for the future. And then now we see the Armenian Prime Minister, who had just recently said, and then he continues saying that let's just sign what we already have agreed, and then we can proceed with the next steps. Well, it's really kind of, it makes sense, the Armenian position in that sense, because it's clearly, I mean, when you spend so much time on discussing certain topics, and especially in light of remaining security threats to Armenia, of course, Armenia wants to get a guarantee that what they already discussed and agreed that can go into life, so that they can actually see the result of their work, rather than just kind of to make a short statement with open-ended process that no one knows when will deliver any kind of concrete results.
What would you say are the main issues of disagreement between the two countries?
So for the very moment, it's really very interesting how the sides have been dropping like different topics from the discussion. You might remember that in the very beginning, when they just started the process after the 2020 war, these were like 3 topics that they have been discussing. So one of them, it was the fate of Nagorno Karabakh, and unfortunately that issue kind of naturally was removed from the discussion after the Azerbaijani military attack and operation last September. The second topic, it has been the issues related to the border, and there you can see both like the approach related to the border demarcation, but also the presence of the Azerbaijani troops within Armenia, and also the issue of border security kind of in a broader sense. We have Armenian and Azerbaijani military standing very close to each other, which can potentially lead to new incidents spilling out in new escalations. And the third topic, it's kind of a broader transportation roads, and then this is where you can see how the sides have been discussing, on the one hand, with so-called issue of corridor, but also the issue of opening the borders for Armenia, which has been staying isolated for over 3 decades now due to the conflict, and also how to proceed, how to manage the topics. So for the very moment, what we understand from the public statements and also from some of the conversation that people like me have been having with officials and also the diplomats, the main issue is not even about any of the topics kind of that they have been discussing on essence. It's more about the demand that Azerbaijan has been posing to Armenia. And it has to do with the constitution. So Baku has this sort of demand that Armenia should be changing its constitution to remove any kind of mention of Nagorno-Karabakh, because in Baku they believe that that would remove any kind of territorial aspirations from the Armenian side, no matter who stays in power, to which we hear that Armenia on the one hand stays open to continue the dialogue. But on the other, we also see how in Armenia they start believing that it's just a stolen tactic, and then they kind of start questioning what's next. Even like if we find a way to agree on this very topic, what will be another issue that Azerbaijan might use in order to delay the process.
do you think this constitutional change is important to Azerbaijan, or it is a stalling technique?
It's a very good question. I understand that the topic of the change to the constitution and a number of Armenian laws and like legislative pieces, it has become like a public issue only since the spring. I understand that it was tabled by Azerbaijan in the past as well, but it was not really in the center of attention or any kind of meetings, either at the level of leaders or like at the level of foreign ministers. So it's something that has become such a kind of a push from the side of Baku, relatively just kind of, you know, starting from the spring. And then that makes people believe that it's probably something that Azerbaijan still uses in order to delay the result, like some sort of declaration or what some people call a peace agreement or a peace treaty. We can see that on the Armenian side, they are ready to accommodate even the demands that are not really you know, something that they kind of, you know, where they have doubts about the intentions coming from Azerbaijan. So we saw the Armenian Prime Minister launching the process of the review of the constitution with a commission which should be presenting its vision next year. Yeah, no, it's right after the parliamentary elections that should be taking place in Armenia in 2026. And then there will be still a process in order to kind of to discuss it with the public and also probably the referendum. But there are other ways how to meet even this with kind of, you know, the demands coming from Azerbaijan. For example, you could also start kind of make some sort of declaration, or the other way, for example, some people are discussing whether the Constitutional Court in Armenia, which is now to review the recent agreement on the Border Demarcation Commission work, whether that could be something that could be enough, you know, that Baku would satisfy Baku's demands and then concerns. And I should say that this is a really very open question, you know, and no one really has an answer to that, what exactly Armenia can do in the short term in order to meet Azerbaijan's demand on the constitution.
Why would Azerbaijan need to stall and lengthen the peace process? How would it benefit from it? Wouldn't both countries benefit from peace and maybe future economic prosperity?
It's a very good question, you know, and then I should say that especially after what happened last year in Nagorno Karabakh, when Azerbaijan went there and then took the enclave by force, many people said like that Azerbaijan is basically kind of losing an incentive in proceeding with the next steps with Armenia. But we saw that the process resumed. It was not the same way it was before, like we didn't really see meetings taking place at the level of leaders with the mediation, for example, of the Western diplomats or officials, right? I mean, before it was the European Union that was so much involved, and also the United States that was trying to bring the sides together. So now it was more like a bilateral discussion going on, and it's clear that you know, there is this question in the air that what Azerbaijan can get immediately from the very moment, you know, because it seems like its main goal has been met, and then that was kind of taking over Nagorno Karabakh. And in that sense, there is kind of, you know, another question coming from that. So what will be the future of the region, of the South Caucasus? Are we gonna see continuous kind of, you know, conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan with like sporadic incidents and sometimes escalations, or sometimes even military force used in order to put the pressure on Armenia to get what it wants at that very moment, Azerbaijan, you know, from the Armenian side? Should we continue living in this instability and then constant like a fear? And then that does not really contribute to either proper investment, or also it has an impact on the democracy, and then not to mention all other aspects of that. So, I mean, it's a very important question, and I should say that I'm not sure that there is kind of a precise answer. It's more kind of for people still to watch the situation and to see how it develops, while still hoping that there can be a potential to proceed with more stability and peace rather than another war.
Why do you think Azerbaijan's demand is to not include any Western countries in the peace process?
Azerbaijan seems to be comfortable with potential and possible mediation with the Russian participation. What Azerbaijan wants still kind of to see is a bilateral discussion going on with Armenia without really having the European or the American officials or diplomats present at the very table for the content discussion. Azerbaijan seems to be comfortable with them kind of to, for example, set the table, but not to sit at the table. It's clear that for Azerbaijan, it's kind of, we sort of a dialogue with Armenia. It also provides more opportunities in order to get some of the things that Azerbaijan is more interested in. Armenia is now weak. Armenia lost the war. And in that sense, Armenia has much less space to argue and to negotiate with Azerbaijan. If you have some Western officials or Western diplomats who may have a say and have something to discuss with Azerbaijan, then you actually might not have the same level of freedom in order to proceed and then make Armenia agree to certain things that you want.
What role does the U.S. play in these negotiations without directly participating in them?
In words of one U.S. official, there are now many more officials traveling from D.C. to Yerevan than to any other country in that neighborhood. And then that probably also signals the U.S. interest and also the Armenian being welcome to have a discussion and a dialogue about possibly strengthening the dialogue and also strengthening the relationship. What's really very important is a declaration that was made during the spring with the participation of the EU and the US senior leadership with Armenia. It was done in Brussels, but also as a follow-up to that, there was a meeting taking place in Yerevan to sign a strategic agreement to deepen basically the relations and to see what else can be done on different fronts with bilateral ties. On the Armenian side, the interest is clear, and it has to do, of course, first of all, with its desire to stay an independent state. And then when you watch what's happening in the broader neighborhood, and I'm talking first of all, of course, about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, you start thinking about your own future and how to guarantee staying the state, keeping yourself independent. It has been coinciding with more aggression and then more attacks coming from the Azerbaijani side. And I'm talking not only about what happened in Nagorno Karabakh last year, which led to exodus of over 100,000 people, but it's also about the attacks and the problems that have been taking place along the Armenian-Azerbaijani border. This is where Armenia feels itself weak and would want to see more cooperation and then more links with the United States. And then we see that from DC, there is an interest to have a look, to see how to proceed. I would say that the United States still stays quite cautious of these processes. It's probably dictated, first of all, from their desire to avoid any kind of, major instability in the neighborhood. While all of that, so much going on in Ukraine, it's always very difficult, to also find a resource and respond to, for example, to what might potentially happen in Armenia. But on the other hand, we clearly see that they start sensing the signals that Armenia is sending towards the Western capitals, asking to revisit the relationship, to see what else and how else to proceed.
Will this shift, in your opinion, after the U.S. elections? And how do you think the U.S. election process influences the peace process? Is there some type of a connection? Is it being stalled? How does it all play together?
Yeah, it's an issue of speculation. And then you can hear people, especially in the region, asking this very question. Is Azerbaijan really kind of stalling the process with signing the declaration just because they want to see who will be the next US president? And well, you know, while with very issue, of course, it matters, you know, kind of in a broader sense, I would say that when you speak to the Armenian officials and also to the Armenian political establishment, you sense that there is a certain kind of, you know, change in the way how they speak and what they say about their relationship with the Western countries. And in that sense, of course, partnership with the United States is really very important and essential. And again, kind of in the broader terms, if there is a change, like radical change in the US stance, for example, on the Ukraine war, that will certainly have an impact not only on Ukraine, it will have an impact on the whole neighborhood, including Armenia. But on the other hand, you can also see that the Armenian officials seem to be interested and ready to find the ways how to proceed, even step by step, you know, process, maybe slower than they would want to see, including with the European Union. And those in Brussels seem to be very interested and ready to go for like a, you know, slower process, but still kind of to revisit and to see how to support Armenia while kind of strengthening the relationship. So I would say that on the one hand, of course, with this kind of the area of unknown, but we also see the determination and probably the desire to continue the process, and probably a closer cooperation with the European Union could be also the way forward in that sense.
And in regards the congressional hearing about Armenia and the democracy in Armenia, what did you see that was different, perhaps?
Well, you know, I was really very honored to join a cohort of distinguished speakers, and I met the congressional delegation in July when they were visiting Armenia, and we had a very, very good and open conversation on many topics. For me, it was really very interesting to see the questions and also the statements that they were making, which were so much more informed, I would say, compared to what we heard or saw, maybe not necessarily with members, but kind of in a broader sense in the discussion on Armenia. I think that very hearing was important from this point of view, that we had actually people from both political camps in the United States in the midst of a very hard pre-electoral process here, coming together to make a statement on Armenia and the need to proceed with the relationship, the deepening the relationship with Armenia and supporting Armenia's democratic choice. We saw the people coming and joining not only from the Senate, but also from the House of Representatives. And again, kind of, you know, I think it was more their statement and then their desire to send a signal to the region that they hear and they are ready to consider it and then to support it. And again, it's really very important that it was happening while this campaign is going on. And then hopefully it can contribute to dissolve some of the anxiety and then fears that exist in the region about potential result of the US elections.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Armenia is considering leaving CSTO. Would it be beneficial to Armenia to leave the CSTO?
Well, you know, when you hear the statements that are made publicly, even by senior Armenian officials, it's clear that this is like one of the topics that is top in their agenda, and then this is what they are discussing and what they are thinking about. And it's clear that with very issue, it has to do with very essential kind of security concerns that Armenia has. Yerevan has been very frustrated with how not only Russia, which is leading the CSTO, but also some other members, what kind of statements they have been making. in light of these continuous problems that Armenia has along its borders with Azerbaijan. And then on the other hand, we also have been noticing with decline in the interest from the Armenian side because the CSTO, which previously delivered some cheaper weaponry that Armenia could use, it's not happening anymore. And then on the other hand, the membership in the CSTO prevents Armenia from cooperating with many other countries, especially in the Western Bloc, and in order to purchase their weapons. So Armenia has been really working hard, I would say, to find a way to, on the other hand, to articulate its concerns to the bloc, also to find a way to proceed with no formal divorce, but at least kind of, freezing its participation, again, no formal leaving of the organization for the moment, while articulating and explaining to its Western partners that Armenia needs this support despite being member of the CSTO and despite some of the concern that still exist. And you can from time to time hear some Western officials or politicians mentioning something like this. And I think the breaking point was still that with contract with France, which is the EU member state, the NATO member state, that started helping Armenia to build its defense, rebuild its defense, and the other is, of course, the decision by the European Union to support Armenia through its so-called EPF program. It's like a special mechanism that the European Union created following the Russian invasion of Ukraine to support neighbors, and then support the partners. And Armenia is the only CSTO member state that started profiting from this very tool. I understand that the process will continue developing in that sense, and that the position that Armenia has chosen, kind of, like on the one hand to make steps and articulate its concerns regarding its own situation, but also kind of, what it sees, what's happening with the other partners in the CSTO. And then, while not really kind of taking the decision, it's something where Armenia probably still kind of in a waiting mode to see how much support it can get from the West. I think they also in Yerevan might be understanding, that with this really a very difficult time, it just kind of, in the international arena, and then kind of you cannot really count for some major steps related especially to the security alliances like the NATO, for example, partnership and things like that. So, I mean, they are in this limbo, but I think they have been trying to kind of to drive that car carefully.
We know that Armenia is heavily dependent on Russia. And does it somehow prevent the U.S. to make any investments in Armenia?
It's a very good question, and it has to do with another alliance that Armenia is formally part of. It's a customs union that is again led by Russia. There are other ways how to develop that partnership, of course, to a certain level, while still remaining part of this customs union for the moment. I think what's really very important for the U.S. side there is still to see some sort of movement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and hopefully, potentially, that can lead to some processes with Turkey that could somehow, on the one hand, provide more security guarantees and stability in the region, because this is what brings the investment. But on the other hand, also that can open so many more opportunities for cooperation and kind of, bilateral support on different fronts. I think still for Armenia, the kind of the natural partner when it comes to economic development is the European Union, because it's closer, and in that sense, of course, still kind of, developing your trade relationship with the United States, it's more difficult, you know. But if you start kind of getting through one of the processes, it can definitely contribute to the other.
In regards to the Nagorno-Karabakh refugees, is there perspective for them to ever return back to their homes? And what are the next steps in solving this issue?
When people discuss the issue of return, in many cases they start discussing it from the human rights point of view, right? I mean, and we saw the discussion going on and the ICJ provisional ruling into this topic. I think that covers perfectly, you know, like the things that should be done. The other front is, of course, the diplomatic process, and this is where we don't really see much progress going on. And that provokes a lot of frustration, especially among the refugees, and you can see how they complain about this. They start asking questions about this very topic. On the other hand, you know, when you have 30 years of conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, it's usually with so many wars, yeah, and casualties and the displacement of both sides, lots of grievances, and also profound mistrust between the sides, and then looming danger of another escalation. In this very situation, you have to start with something, and then seems like what they have been trying to do, Armenia and Azerbaijan, is kind of to select the topics where they can have more chances to agree and then to proceed. That doesn't mean that the issue is absolutely eliminated, in my view. I've been traveling for Armenia since last year a lot and talking to many refugees from Nagorno-Karabakh, from different parts of it. And then every time you ask them about their plans, they would respond with a question about, what do you think, will I go back? Right? I mean, so you can sense how much it is part of their identity. And it's really very difficult to tell with people that it's not happening. Even if we tell, I'm not sure that they will believe it. But while it's happening, you know, while we kind of go through this very difficult process and traumatizing process, I think it's really very essential to find a way to meet the immediate needs of these people. You can see how they continue suffering, you know, from the very fact that they don't have the place to live. Many of them find hard time finding the jobs, also just integrating into Armenia. And then, you know, there is this very saying, and it's not necessarily only about Armenia or Nagorno-Karabakh. I heard it in many other places where I've been working throughout my life, is that let's find a way to provide dignified life to these people while they are living in one place, so that if there is a potential and for them kind of to see the new chapters in their lives, they are stronger, they are better educated, they have good health, and then that they actually have many more potentials for development. Armenia has been doing quite a lot. We can see that especially for such a small country with so many people living below the poverty line, that Armenia continues paying subsidies and tries to come up with different programs. But even when you speak to the Armenian officials, they don't make it a secret that they are really struggling to come up, you know, with different ways how to propose things to the refugees so that they can really accept and then kind of make use of these opportunities. And in that sense, I think the United States definitely has things to say and support, and not just with the cash. It's actually also about sharing some of your experience that you have of how to mitigate the problems related to such a major displacement in the longer term.
In regards to the situation between Armenia and Azerbaijan, Turkey has played a significant role in the past. What is its role currently?
Turkey still has a very important role, and then we see that the contacts between the Armenian and Turkish officials, they continue. They just recently had another meeting at the border crossing, where Armenia definitely would want to see, you know, like some processes going on with people going back and forth, you know, and being able to cross that border. No, it's not a secret anymore that the Turkish side is still waiting for some sort of agreement that can be signed between Armenia and Azerbaijan in order to proceed with implementation of some of the agreements that were made between Armenia and Turkey, and that first of all, of course, to do with making the border crossings working, so that at least kind of third country citizens can go back and forth. And then the second thing is, of course, to find a way to start making the steps for the direct trade, because all of that is now happening through some other countries. And then what exactly will be enough for Turkey to proceed with implementation of this agreement? This is the question, you know. I mean, there are. So would, like, for example, a short declaration that Armenia and Azerbaijan might make, yeah, would it be enough for Turkey? Maybe not, because Turkey seems to be more interested in seeing kind of something more stable and profound between Armenia and Azerbaijan, like some real peace agreement, so that they can then open the border and then also allow kind of the processes going on. But maybe we could see a different development, and then for Turkey it might be actually enough to see the declaration, and then in order to proceed with certain agreements.
Olesya, thank you very much for the interesting interview. There's always a lot more questions to ask on this topic, and hopefully we'll see you again. And we're always interested in your input and your perspective.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.